Hey everyone, it's Jason. Welcome to another DC deck building game. This is for Rebirth. So this game plays a little bit differently than the regular DC deck building game. The overall components or how it plays are going to be the same. You have a basic hand of starting cards. You're going to buy cards from the lineup to increase your deck to make it better. And you have a goal of villains to defeat. The thing that then turns this different is it adds a board game element, and it's campaign. So instead of having your standard lineup of just 5 cards, you have these location tiles, which we'll look through all these. And then in between each location tile are where your different lineup cards go. This is a 100% co-op game. There's a way to play it solo and some variations like that. But you're working as a team to try and defeat these villains and defeat various scenarios. There are 8 scenario packs in the set. You get these little movers for your characters. Each scenario is going to have a different story. So they're showing here, scenario 1 is Proving Grounds. It's going to have each one's going to have a different setup. It's going to tell you different cards to place down, different piles, different orders, things like that. Yes, you actually can play competitively. There's co-op and competitive. It's actually nice. There is a different way to play and has different rules. But yeah, the basis of the game is the same. You buy cards to increase your deck, or you defeat some villains. You're trying to maybe do something different with the scenario. Beating the scenarios, you play them as a full campaign, all 8 in a row. Each time you're gonna, depending if you win or lose or what happens, you're gonna gain some extra bonuses when you win. He might be another card gets added to the deck, or you might unlock a signature card for your character, so your personal deck gets a little bit better, or various things like that. There's some different things there. Some of them are like your goal in this one is you have to defeat X number of villains, or might be something hidden. I'm giving generalizations because I don't want to spoil any specifics, but I know there's some that might be like, hey, you have a hidden thing that each player has to do instead of as a group. So it might be like one player has to amass 15 victory points so that they're considered to have won, or another one maybe has to have defeated X number of villains or gained X number of equipment cards. And then so each scenario plays a little bit differently. And they're different sizes, so some have 3 to 5 cards, some have 10 cards. And then, if I remember right, at the end of 8, there's actually kind of a way to have a replay mode. Because after you play through these once, it might not be as fun to replay through them again unless you have a brand new group of characters. But if you're the same person playing the same scenarios over and over and over, not to say they won't be fun scenarios, but the mystery part of it will go away. And I will unbox those, but I will do those in a part 2 video. So there will be spoilers for those, and I will make sure I say spoiler warnings before I start opening them. But the first video, we're just going to go through the regular, non-spoilery parts of the cards. So, now, if you like the original deck building game, you'll probably like this. If you want more of a campaign or a story, this is definitely fun. The only kind of downside, the 2 downsides to this game right now are, 1, there's currently no expansions for it. There are talks of maybe doing it because people were, they just had your 50th, not 50th, 10th anniversary. Cryptic Zoic, the guys who created the game, just had their 10th anniversary DC deck building anniversary. So, that was one of the big discussions, is what do they want to do with Rebirth? Do people just want to abandon it? And I think the overwhelming thing was people were just like, it's different than the rest of the stuff, and since there's nothing to go with it, people weren't sure what to do. They didn't know if they wanted to invest into a new board game style game without having more content. Because, you can check out my other video where I kind of talk about player, or what to buy for this. And that's one of the things I do bring up with this and some of the other sets, is this, Rivals and stuff like that. They add some fun new mechanics to the overall core of the game, but because those mechanics have things that are tied to that version, you can't mix and match every set together very easily. And this is one of them because it adds locations, so it has movement abilities. And all the villains in here have special things for being rewards and stuff, and they have some different keywords in there in this game that make it very hard to just mix and match everything together. You can do it, but it's not as easy as just taking a handful of cards from this and mixing it with the base game. So there's kind of an issue there. But we have all our same cards. There's a couple of new types of cards as well. They're basic cards, which are kind of like your kicks from the base game, but they're slightly different because they're tied to locations. Other than that, you have your villains, heroes, ongoings. The only thing there's not going to be in here is the purple location cards, because we have special locations used for the game, and they didn't want to make them harder. So then you set up the game is basically set up like this. You're going to have a threat tracker in the middle, which is going to keep track of stuff. If it gets to 5 and it fills out, you lose the game. So you have to kind of come back against this threat tracker. Each location is going, which are these big cards here. And this is that compared to a regular card. So you can see what size they're little cardboard things. So I guess this should be them compared to one of the oversized cards. So compared to an oversized card, it is a little thinner on the top, not much, just barely. But the oversized card's just a tad longer. So I don't know why they didn't just make them the same as the oversized cards, and then you can sleeve them. Maybe they thought because people are going to put characters and cards on that maybe they get stuffed up too easy. I'm not sure. But yeah, so you will lay them all out, and there are seven of them, but you only use 5 per game. So you're not going to always see the same 5 every single time. And then you get these little counters, which will dictate which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which have to do with various things in the scenarios, or the villains are trying to get to certain areas, and that's how you keep track of it. So that way, for example, the police station here isn't always spot 1. You mix and match them, so one time it could be 1, one time it could be number 5. And then if you have a character that needs to get to, or villain that needs to get to spot 1, they're not always going to the police station. They might go to the police station one time, Arkham Asylum the next time. So it adds some more randomness to the game. Then you put your lineup on the outside in between them. And then this is where the movement part comes in. So there's cards that will let you do move actions. Such as a starter card, which says move 2. So then it does is it lets you move your character 2 spots. So 1, 2, 2. So 1, 2. So each spot is a space. And then you can buy cards or interact with that thing. Some locations have interaction abilities. You could buy this card if you're on that space. This has a basic card you could buy. So you have to move your characters around the board to purchase more cards. It also makes the buying of cards a little bit more difficult, because you can't just look at the 5 cards on the board and be like, oh, I really want that one. Okay, nobody buy that. I want that next turn. Because if you're way down here and you want this orange card, you need to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 move spaces to get there. What is nice is there's a lot of movement cards. There are cards that'll help you out. And that's interesting there too. The other thing is we have these special stack here for building up the things. And normally, the supervillains would be in their own special stack. When you fight a supervillain, you'd always see them off on the outside. Now you just have one main deck where they get mixed in. So you separate the deck into 5 stacks, and then you mix the supervillains into stacks 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you have one stack of cards to go through. One stack to go through, so that you can have some chance to build up your decks and do stuff before a supervillain appears that you need to defeat. So that kind of makes that a little bit more interesting, because in that way, You're not just always like, oh, I can fight that guy right away, but now you have to wait for him. And that might even be a neat idea just to add to the regular game, is mix some super villains in so they're not always sitting out ready to go. Alright, then we have the threat tracker. So the threat tracker is going to have a bunch of already listed abilities. So when it's at 0, so it starts off the game. So I can just actually hold the actual threat tracker up. Sorry, I'm looking at a book. So you have a cooperative side, and then you have a competitive side. So depending on which way you want to play, they're going to have a couple of different abilities. It says, reminder, ongoing threats do not end at the end of the threat. Do not end as threat rises. So if you're at 0, you do, each time a super villain enters the lineup, increase the threat level by 1, and it makes the attack against each player. So every time you have to fight a super villain, they attack everybody. So kind of like when they have their first appearance. Let's see if I can set this down so I don't have to keep holding it. Then, so when you hit level 1, it says ongoing. During step 4 of the turn sequence, if there are no super villains in the lineup, add an additional card to the lineup. And then you also do 1, so everything just keeps adding on. And here's a extra little thing on that, which makes this a little bit different than the original game. So when you add a card to the lineup, so that your 5 cards, normally you don't add in the regular game. You don't ever add a card unless something's taken away. This one, you'll always add 1 card to the lowest card pile. So if you have, when you start the game, you have only 1 card in each pile. But then, like, as things go on, you might end up with 3 cards in one pile, 2 in the other 3 piles, and then 1 that has 1 card. So you'll add 1 card on there. So not only do you have to try and move around the board to get stuff, to buy your certain abilities if you want them, so you have to kind of utilize this movement mechanic a lot. You also have a time element, because if you don't move there quick, it's not, oh, it's just going to sit there until somebody buys it. Nope, because every turn you're going to keep always putting out at least 1 card, and eventually you're going to cover up your old one, so then you might have to buy 2 cards to get the one that you really wanted. Or, you know, the one you want might be under one that another player really wants, so then do wait for them. So it kind of adds the speed calamity of, like, you're in the city and you're trying to protect the city. You know, so now it's like you can't just sit around and wait for the villain. You know, they're going to actively be trying to do stuff to beat you. You can't just sit around and, like, wait until you have, you know, I've trained enough to, you know, quote-unquote, like, earn or learn a special ability. Like, nope, if you don't get it now, you might not be able to get it. You might not have time to wait around. So it adds that extra little element to it. We have level 2, which is a one-shot. Destroy the highest cost non-villain card in each lineup slot. 3 is ongoing villains cost 1 more to defeat. Nothing happens at 4. And then at 5, it says your team has 3 rounds to defeat a 5th supervillain or you lose the game. So you get up to that point, you may have already defeated almost all 5 of them. Because you'll have 1 for each threat, though. So like when 1 comes, so every time 1 comes in, it goes up 1. So first, second, third, fourth. So by the time you hit 5, and there's been the 5th villain, you hopefully defeated at least 4 of them. So you only have to deal with the 1. But if you haven't, and you have 3 out there, now you have 3 turns to defeat all 3 of them. Otherwise, you lose the game. So again, it kind of puts that time element. And then if you're doing competitive, so the first one's the same. Each time a villain enters a lineup, threat goes up by 1. Ongoing step 4. If there are no super villains, add an additional card. That stays the same. But now threat level 2 we have. Each time a player defeats a super villain, that player destroys the top card of their deck. So you kind of get punished for that. And then we have a one-shot, add 1 card to each lineup. Spot 4. Ongoing, at the start of your turn, you may reveal 2 cards with a cost of 0 from your hand. If you do, draw a card. And then the last one is, you have 3 rounds to defeat a 5th supervillain, or the game ends, count VP. And this kind of adds back to that original, like, competitiveness of the base game, is that you want to count your VP at the end. So this is not like you want to try and beat the supervillains, especially because they're worth a lot of points, but you could maybe be like, hey, I'm going to let them focus on that. I'm going to buy, like, 40 cards instead. So there's a couple different tweaks and twists that way. Alright, I have a quick add-on here. I just forgot I don't know, I keep forgetting to mention this because I don't have it. It's stuck in here in a weird location. It's damaging locations. So each location has 5 hit points. Each time a supervillain makes an attack while they're at their destination, which is why you want to keep them from getting there, and it is not avoided, place a damage on the location. If it is avoided, do not place a token on the location. Regular villains do not cause damage. It's just the supervillain ones. As soon as it has 5 damage tokens on it, remove them and place a destroyed token on that location. Remove all basic cards from the destroyed location immediately, and the ability of that location cannot be used. So, basically we have counters that have 1s and they have 3s on them. And then some of them say destroyed. So yeah, basically you put 1, you put a 2, and then if you get up to 3, and then you can have 4, and then you eventually put a 5th one on there, flip it over, it'll destroy it. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting that you can do that. Damage on location is permanent. Keep track of damage from scenario to scenario. You'll discover only a couple ways to repair damage. In future scenarios, you must place a destroyed token on a destroyed location. When it is used during a scenario, do not place any basic cards on it, and cannot be used. A destroyed location goes to destination, and villains still move towards it. Do not add damage tokens to destroyed locations. If you manage to repair a destroyed location, you'll still qualify for the no destroyed location points in the campaign. Alright, so that's just, I kind of want to point out just a couple of things that do mention just, none of the regular cards mention doing extra damage or doing repairs. For the most part, it's just stuff in the scenarios that do start to mention that more. So it's not, it's a factor you can play in there, but it is also something that also, again, adds to that urgency of the game. Because if you start losing these cards, you start losing locations, you start losing your extra decks and stuff like that, your abilities, it's going to make the game harder for you. So it's just another reason, focus on the super villains first, then the regular villains, so on and so forth. Alright, just want to make sure that was added in there. So that kind of makes the game a little bit more interesting. And then there's all these scenarios. So it says when you open up a scenario pack, you can start reading the setup. It's going to tell you if you have to add certain things to certain piles or do certain things. But don't start reading through every card, because you kind of want to get surprised. So hopefully, yeah, they'll add some more expansions and some extra things that can be really cool. Also, I hope that if they do add expansions, these scenarios, it would be nice if 2 things happen with that. It would be 1, if they work independently of this, and it'd be nice if they mix and match it. So it's not like, so let's say in like scenario 3 you earn a brand new starter card. Cool, that's awesome. Which I'm not saying that should happen, I'm just as an example. You earn like a special starter card to help you out in scenario 3. So it'd be, like, I don't want like a new expansion to like require that scenario to be out necessarily. But on the other hand, it would be nice for it not just to be like, hey, you can play through these 8, or you can play through these new 5 scenarios. It'd be neat if it was, you could mix and match. You could play scenario 1 from this set, scenario 3 from that, 2 from that set. If you could rearrange these in different orders, that would make it even more interesting. So it says you can keep track of your log at the back of the book. We're going to flip and look at that really quick. Alright, so here's all the different stuff. So this is saying who's playing what character, if you gain signature cards, damage on locations, so you can actually lose your different locations, what scenario are, you have 2 attempts, and whether you failed, and then you can keep track. There's some side missions to do, and final victories, and you can get your overall points to see how well you did. So that is interesting as well. So there's signature cards you'll earn throughout the game. So we'll go over those in video 2 as well, because they're kind of campaign spoilers, so I don't want to jump into them. Some of them are side missions. There's a special solo mode, so it just has its own rules. I'm not going to get into too much of that. So yeah, competitive mode. So don't use the scenario parameter. Secret cards or side missions. Players should agree on whether or not to use signature cards, how many. So basically what you're doing is you're ignoring the scenario mode, which is having you do special stuff, and you're just playing the game as normal, trying to beat stuff and gain points. So that kind of eliminates the new stuff and kind of just adds is making it more of the regular mode. And then there's card clarifications. This does mention how you can mix the game with other games. This is the best way to mix cards with other games into it. But note that all the villains in Rebirth have simply an attack targeting a foe in the competitive each game. They might be underpowered while mixed in with other sets, although the rewards and increased BP should offset that. So, and it's just mixing super villains with attacks from other sets in your Rebirth main deck. So you can add them in there, but if you don't add villains with attacks into this game, then they're kind of not. Then they're just sort of in the way, because that's sort of the whole point of them is they move around and they attack. So the added villains won't have destination on it, so grab a few 6-sided dice. When a non-Rebirth villain enters the lineup, roll a 6-sided dice. So what that means is, I'm going to grab one of the villain cards quick. We're going to look at one of those. So what they're talking about here is Dr. Polaris has villain. He has an attack. So he says, so whether at his destination, he's going to do an attack against whoever's there, and then he has reward. His destination is spot number 4. So then what you do is, if for whatever reason, so if our police station here is spot number 4, when Dr. Polaris comes out, he's going to start in whatever lineup he would start in the normal way. So like whatever card has the lowest piles, then every turn he's going to move one spot clockwise towards spot number 4. So once he gets to the police station, he's going to attack any player that's in that spot. So basically, if you're on a spot with a villain, they won't move. They'll stop and they'll work on trying to fight you instead. So you're kind of also, besides trying to move around the board to protect your various, or to get your cards and stuff, you're also doing it to stop villains from doing stuff, because they're going to keep trying to move to their different locations to do things. So that is one way to stop them down. I was trying to see. Moving characters. Yeah, so here's kind of mentioning about moving characters around. Otherwise, the turn sequence is fairly the same. There's little differences, but it says each villain has a pentagonal icon in the corner of their art with 1 to 5. So the villain is trying to make their way to that location, referred to as their destination in the rulebook. When they reach their destination, it no longer moves. During step 2 in each player's turn, that player is attacked by each villain at its destination and any in their space as usual. Do everything to keep the villains away from their destination. When you defeat a villain, by paying its cost, you get the reward. Defeated villains are destroyed. You'll never have a villain in your deck. So this kind of makes it the competitive side more like crisis mode, because you're not going to keep adding them. So villains are very active at the beginning of each player's turn. And during step 2, villains at their destination or certain space with the active player's character attack only the active player, the player who just started their turn. If you're subject to multiple attacks, you can resolve them in any order. After resolving all attacks, villains not sharing a space with the character move 1 space towards their destination. Sharing space with the active player's character, attack only the active player. So if you have Batman and Superman on the same spot and it's Batman's turn, they'll only attack Batman. If you're subject to multiple attacks, it says, and then villains take the shortest path to destination. If there's a tie to the shortest, they move clockwise. Villains already at your destination do not move. So summer cards allow you to move villains. And it says you suffer no penalties for entering a villain space or when a villain enters yours. So you can prevent movement by being on their spots. So it kind of just helps you get around them. A villain does not attack you if it moves to your character space. If it's not your turn, You are not subject to an attack except by supervillains entering play. So when supervillains enter play, they hit everybody. When one more villains is in your character space, at the start of your turn, they will attack you all in the order you're choosing. You may use defense cards to avoid these. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting there. Yeah. All right. So and then there's various things you'll happen that will try and destroy the locations as well. So all right, we're gonna look at some of the tokens, and then we will start going through some of the cards. So yeah, a little bit longer video, so I apologize for that. But the game will make more sense if I go through everything. So you're going to get little standees for your other characters. So the only downside, again, one of these things, is if you try and use characters from other games, the other expansions, you won't have the exact standee. What they were nice enough to do is you get the same basic ones as the original base set, at least. With the exception of Green Lantern, you get 2 Green Lanterns instead. And they're, of course, going to get little colored bases for each one, which are all nice and different colored. That way you can help keep track of who's who, if you need to. We're going to get a bunch of little tokens here, so it's going to say destroyed, or have a number on it. And we're going to get a couple of each for each one, so 1, 2s, and 3s. So that's just going to help figure out some of that stuff for various things in the mode. And we're going to have contained. And then these will have little things at the bottom. It says, doesn't move at the start of your turn, remove at the end of your next turn. You got a couple of those, and then you have a little threat meter. And this is to help keep track of where you are on your threat board. Just so you can keep track very easily. So that is a couple of things there. And then we have our number tokens and other stuff. You're also going to get a divider and a randomizer card, and this is for the multiverse set, multiverse box storage set, and that has some special things to go with it. What else do we have? Our last component, which I will also go over in the next video, it's not a card, just because I want to try and avoid some of the spoilers, is we're going to get, and they're falling over on me, all these little trackers here, which replace stuff on the threat tile. So they're going to go on like this, and then you flip one over, it's going to have a special effect. So it might cover up one of these, and these are going to be various things for, during the scenario campaigns, it might say, hey, you do this, and like put one of these in it, and they have numbers on, or letters on them. So it might say, take tile A and replace 3, and then it gives you a different effect. So then that also makes us a little bit more interesting. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 8 of them, plus a big one that replaces the regular end goal. So I think there's one for each scenario, I'm going to guess, but I'm not 100% on that. Alright, so I think what we're going to do, so let's kind of explain the how-to. I think what we'll do is we'll just do video 2. Part 2 will be all of the cards, and the locations, and I'll make sure I give a spoiler warning before we get to the scenario stuff. So this is kind of just a how to play, and what's available in Rebirth. Alright, see you guys in part 2.